All right, welcome to MySec Lansing. For announcement, again, Converge is May 10th through the 12th. We did announce the keynote speakers, Amanda Berlin, Kevin Johnson, and Johnny Christmas.
Yep.
And then we're still looking for more speakers. So submit a talk, submit a paper. This one, submit a talk. So
maybe we can chat afterwards.
All right. Yes, all right. That's all I have. Is there any other announcements? Anything going on in the community? All right.
Nothing exciting. Everybody on Slack for MySec?
I was not aware one existed.
One does.
Yes.
Okay.
I will send you info.
If you go out on MySec US, you can just go ahead and put the link right there too.
Dying. That kind of sucks.
All right.
Got wrecked.
Yeah.
Here's a terrible card. Can I get one too? Yeah.
You need to get me some of those cards too.
Oh, this is a fancy card. Very visible.
All right, with that, hand it over to Brian.
All right. All right. Sorry, text got squished. I don't know. Blame Google. Started in there, brought it down offline. But so my name's Brian. I work as a systems administrator for a local hosting company, and my talk is going to be on cryptocurrency. Not so much on the mining of it, but on the malicious use of it. Specific trends that I saw, and then some of the research, data gathering, and techniques that I've seen being used, so that I can kind of share what I've learned in my roughly 6-month dive into this at this point. And I guess one question I would have kind of to start off here, has anyone in this room found malicious crypto mining on their network before?
Does in a web page count?
Was it a website you owned?
No.
Okay. But yes, that's definitely one of the attack vectors.
We've seen lots of attempts because it's pretty much switched from being just cryptoware to basically Bitcoin mining with cryptocurrency.
Right, and in this case, I guess I should clarify, I'm going to be focusing on the Bitcoin mining side of things. And actually, I would say is the move away from ransomware, using cryptography for ransoming as opposed to mining for cryptocurrency. And as I was kind of getting this ready, one of the podcasts I listened to called Risky.biz, which is an awesome podcast if you haven't come across it before. They were doing their weekly thing, and they came up with this phrase that I think just kind of works perfect. Cryptocurrency, the internet-wide bug bounty program. And I'll kind of get to my full meaning of that as I get through the talk here, so I'm kind of going to leave it there and continue on. So if any of you have been, at least been interested in cryptocurrency at any point in time, I'm sure you're aware Bitcoin started out small and has gotten pretty big. This is, your timeline graph going back to June of 2013 through a couple months ago when I put the slide together here, and the price of Bitcoin. And it was definitely a major news item back in December when it was peaking around 19K for a short while there. And let's see, actually, I'm going to stick here a second. As the price started rising, started noticing some trends in some of my day-to-day work. So I deal with a lot of compromised websites, and most often the way that the malicious actors monetize them tend to be spamming and phishing. Day in and day out, those are the things that happen all the time. There were some rumors kind of going through the organization back in like early 2017 where we were starting to see some miners on servers, and we were kind of making jokes about it. Oh, that person is just really terrible at their security setup. How did they get that on there and not know about it? Stuff like that. Because for a long time, it really didn't make sense to try and mine cryptocurrency as a monetization scheme. And that generally is because you needed to do something like this. Set up a ton of GPUs in parallel, running 24 hours a day to hope to make your money back. And eventually that wasn't enough, so then you had to move to ASICs. And generally China has the market cornered on that, so if you want a Bitcoin mine, I guess at least until the government tried to start shutting that down, so now they're moving to Canada. But regardless, you needed very expensive and specialized hardware to make a good profit with Bitcoin, especially once it got to the point where it was worth a lot of money. But some ingenious actors out there said, you know what? As the price of Bitcoin rises, the price of other cryptocurrencies kind of float in the same boat. So not only has Bitcoin become more profitable, other cryptocurrencies, in specific Monero. And one of the things that really made this a target item to start using crypto mining as a means of monetizing your compromise is due to the fact that it works very well on CPUs. It doesn't need a giant complicated GPU rig or ASIC miners. There really comes down to a specific algorithm that they use to generate the coins, which does not scale very well with specialized hardware. You can get some additional return using like a GPU as opposed to a CPU, but with Bitcoin you get thousands of times the benefit. With Monero, you get about a 2 times benefit. So the price to pay out there just really doesn't make sense. So most people tend to mine Monero with CPUs. So this all started to click for me back around the October-November time period when I first started seeing them in my day-to-day work. It wasn't a lot. I had seen maybe about 2 of them by that time, but I was interested to see, is this going to become a thing? And from the October-November time period, it definitely has. So this was from, it's got the little thing down there. I can't remember the name of the organization off the top of my head right now, but they put out their December, malware, what are they seeing out there. Coin miners ended up being the second most popular thing in December that they saw. And I would say that from my experience, I'm seeing similar. Not just from the new stuff being put out, but a lot of existing malware started including this as another way to monetize what they already had compromised. So I started going through my environment to see how prevalent it was for us. So in our system, I used the resources that I was able to pull from. So in this case, I had already had a good deal of incidents that I worked on directly in our Slack system. People will often ask questions on something they've seen. So I was able to troll through that to find, any notices or notifications that people had put in there for, hey, I saw this and this. And then I was able to also pull from our ticketing system. So being able to, again, look for some very key terms, was able to pull some pretty good data. Overall, ended up getting about 100 cases until I felt like I had a good feel and grasp of how the setup was. Some very trends started showing up, and some of the stuff that is apparent. So most of these miners tend to make outbound external connections. And generally that's to a publicly available mining pool, which essentially is a group of miners getting together and pooling their resources, especially as the mining gets harder and harder to calculate the hashes to create the coins. Pooling of resources gets everyone to get that next payout quicker, and then depending on how much you put into the pool is what your payout ends up being back. The mining software is actually pretty standard. Malware authors are generally not going out and reinventing the wheel. They're just taking existing crypto mining software and packaging the binary into whatever they're already using. So finding this stuff, it's not hard because it's pretty common. As long as you can identify the top mining programs, you can pretty well find, you know, this stuff going on. And because that those particular mining packages need to generally talk to a mining pool, there's a lot of network traffic. So if you know what to look for, it's actually pretty easy to find mining because it is so noisy. So here's some of the stuff that I was able to pull out of those cases that I went through. So in this case, what we're looking at is the mining pools that were in use in our network. And over time, you will see some changes. And some of these are pretty public and like what you would consider legit mining pools. So I'm going to use one that is the highest case there, the cryptopool.fr, which is a pool based out of France. Technically, they are just a legit crypto pool operation. Their idea is just, you know, you mine cryptocurrency and that's what we do. But in this case, they were also pretty heavily used for malicious mining as well. Now, one of the particularities of using Monero, besides the fact that it goes well on CPU architecture, is that it is less traceable than other cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin, there is a way you can track every transaction. You can pretty easily find wallets and figure out who paid who what at what time and how much. You just have to know how to dig far enough. Monero, on the other hand, uses a different setup. I believe it's called ring something. But essentially, the idea is that all transactions are secret. There is no way to tell who paid who what except the two individuals that processed the transaction. They're the only ones who can, you know, prove that one person paid another person. So while you can tell what pool they're talking to, you're not going to get to the final who owns the wallet type setup there. Doesn't mean you can't gain some good information from them, but it isn't a full path to find out, you know, who compromised you. Then on the other hand, you will see things where people spin up their own pool. The Linux-repository-updates is one of my favorites. They registered that domain so that when it was running, it looked like you were running updates.
Question. Is there a public list of like all these known type servers, or is this kind of as a discovery?
So, two things on that. Yes, you can most certainly go. There's a lot of cryptocurrency, you know, fan sites out there that will essentially list all the pools that are currently out there. There's a ton. They grow every day. And there's kind of a trade-off. So in this case, I tended to focus on ones that I saw being used maliciously as opposed to pulling every single one that's out there, just due to the man hours needed to, you know, find all of those. And then the other thing is that some of those other pools, one, they may not be around for very long, so why worry about them? Other ones will hide behind things like Cloudflare. So While you might know the domain name, you don't know much more past that point. And that'll make more sense as I get a little further here as looking at that. But yeah, you definitely can find a pretty comprehensive list of all the public ones. Another trend that's pretty apparent is that the network traffic tends to use pretty standard ports as far as standard to mining pools, with, for whatever reason, a lot of them liking the quad digits, so 333, 555, 666, 777. Sometimes they try to be a little more, less obvious, using ports like port 80, port 8080, 8848. I mean, except for port 80, unless you have a reason for that stuff to be moving across your network, I still think it's kind of something that you can, do some looking for and find pretty quickly. But definitely, most networks you shouldn't be seeing port 3333 doing a whole lot on your network. So that was a pretty big indicator and interesting thing for me here. All right. So once we've so that information, you can actually gather it a lot of times in the actual, what you're seeing as you're investigating the incident. After you get that data, you can kind of do some next steps. So in the next section here, I'm going to kind of get into where I went after I gathered that, and then how I gathered that. So this here is the cryptopool.fr. I believe this one, you got to do a little bit of domain tweaking, because a lot of times the domain you're going to see in the investigation will differ a little bit from the public-facing site. So sometimes the mining pool will be on a separate server from the publicly facing web server, but almost all of the public pools will have some place where you can go and gather data. So in this case, a lot of them have a little getting started page, which directly says, hey, here's all the ports we use. So this matched up exactly to the traffic that I was seeing, and they literally just give it to you there on a plate. So a lot of, again, the malware authors, they're not trying to be sneaky yet. They're just using the public data that's sitting right there, and they're just taking it and pulling it into whatever activity they were previously doing. Same thing with the mining programs. So here they're saying, hey, here's the mining programs that you can go download. You can go here, here, or here to get it. And here's exactly how you call the configuration strings. And this is where you'll end up seeing how you're able to pull a lot of the data, is because generally those configurations are going to be sitting either in a file on the system or actually in the running process. And you can actually see what pool it's talking to, as well as the wallet in use. So you'll notice all of those have a wallet address listed there. Again, you still won't be able to find the final actor, but all of these pools have a place, well, all the public pools again, have a place where you can figure out how much you've made, because they want to show you how much you've made. It's not restricted to whose key you plug in there, so it's just literally a search string. You plug in the key that you found during your investigation, it'll tell you how much they made. So here's an example of that. So in this case, there was a file sitting under temp, masquerading as a PHP session file or whatever, and it has right in there the pool that it's talking to. Again, this is one of those ones that's using that cryptopool.fr domain. And of course, the nice big long string is the wallet that was used in this case. So in my data set, I wasn't able to pull keys for every single incident that had occurred because in a lot of cases, this was the first data that we were gathering. So, you know, it was a bit piecemeal as far as actually being able to pull the keys as opposed to just finding every instance, you know, where someone had encountered one of these. But it did lead to some pretty interesting, and you know, it really kind of depends on your time as to when you're pricing this stuff out, because cryptocurrency right now is pretty erratic as far as pricing goes. But to give you an idea of the keys that I was able to pull, when I originally put together the list back in January, the Monero mine was worth over $1 million between all of the cases that I was able to pull keys from. Now that has fluctuated. I priced it again twice more after then, once in February and just before yesterday. So depending on when you cash out, your pricing may vary, but 1.12 million off of some cPanel servers, that's a pretty fair chunk of money.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby indeed. And this is where I was talking before, where if you have that key, you can drop it into the search lookup tool, and it'll tell you how much this person's made, when they last made a hash contribution, and you know, other data like that. So this is how I was able to compile those stats, basically just pulling every key I could, going to every pool that the configuration pointed them to, and pulling that information on down. Another thing that's interesting is there is a wide discrepancy between payouts. So you can see 3 lines really easily, and you can kind of see a few others. 3 of those keys made a bank, and the others not so much. But even the ones that are at the not so much category, when it was originally priced out in January, they each made about $300 to $450 a piece. So not pocket change. And I kind of have 2 feelings about this particular data point. The biggest one there that rolls out the far one there, if I remember right, that one had made 1,711 Monero, but had been locked out of some of their final profits by the pool administrator because they flagged them for using a botnet. So, you know, that kind of gives me a few thoughts about this. One, maybe there are some people who are just really, really good and do the, crash and grab, just, do as much as I can and then get out immediately. But I also have a feeling that some actors might just be trying to spread their losses so they don't get hit by mining a big pool and then not getting the payout. So using a lot of different wallets and only making a little bit per wallet. So I don't know, I feel it could go either way. I don't really have a data point that can tell me whether or not there's just some people really good at it versus someone spreading their risk. And I haven't dived too deeply into it, but one of the places I've been interested in looking into, if we dive a bit further, is actually sending like cease and desist notices for wallets to pool administrators. Haven't really had the time to get into that, but at least from that one particular one, some pool administrators do actually take action against malicious mining. So it could be something interesting to go into. Again, generally you have this information if you're doing a response. So, if you have the time, it might not hurt sending, some sort of letter to the pool administrator. And then, as was brought up earlier, I guess I should kind of, qualify here. The first, I kind of started with investigating what I saw on my web servers, which generally was mining on the server itself. But it quickly became apparent that that was only one of the ways that people were, using this. And one of the other big ones now is what has gained the name cryptojacking, in which generally the malicious actor grabs a nicely provided piece of JavaScript from CoinHive or a competitor and injects it into your site. How they do that? There's all different kinds of fun ways. These were two of my favorites that came up while I was putting this slide together, which was in YouTube ads, which is a little bit of egg on Google because they're supposed to be better than that. And then this other one here from Kevin Beaumont, who was noticing world writable Amazon S3 buckets and going, what are you doing with those? Oh, you're using them as an ad hoc content delivery network for your JavaScript. I wonder what someone's going to do with that. And the LA Times was one of the ones doing that, and they wound up with, well, you have a world writable S3 box. Someone's going to put crypto mining on that. And so if you went to the LA Times website, they had coin, JavaScript running on their own S3 boxes or S3 buckets, paying out someone. Now, generally again, most of the cryptojacking is being done with a JavaScript injection. CoinHive was the one that first kind of made it easy to do, but there's other that are out there. Those are a couple of the different competitors I've come across, because again, as going through this, the scope kind of expanded, and we definitely have seen plenty of JavaScript injections on customer websites as well now. So that's the thing. All right, so, oh, and it all smushed together there. Boo. I'm gonna run through something that I saw just last week, and then I think I'm gonna pull up a couple of the miners themselves, kind of give you guys a little demo here of what they look like, and at least how to spot them. So in this case, I had a incident that occurred about a week and a half ago, where a miner had been placed on a system and it was running under temp, which is pretty common. What was a little bit strange is that it didn't necessarily originally track to a website user. So generally in our setups, each website has its own user. So if there is a miner uploaded, it's pretty obvious, which website was compromised, and track it down from there. But in this case, it was actually owned by the Apache Solr user. And there was a single website that was using Solr as a search tool. We weren't able to provide much more information than that at the time, but with where it was sitting, what ownership it had, and timestamps, and domain logs, it was pretty obvious that something was up with the Solr install. So we cleaned it up, recommended that they update their Solr install. And then literally after the weekend, the SANS Institute, their daily podcast, had a write-up for this, in which they saw 1,400 Apache Solr installs get hit by this exact thing, the exact same particular way that the miner was installed through Apache Solar using an exploit, or I should say, I guess, a vulnerability that was released fall of last year. And they were all talking to a private mining pool, and that was the exact domain. So I mean, just it lined up so perfectly as to the initial incident, and then getting the full explanation a week later. Alright, let's take a little break from the slides here, and let me pull up some of the goodies.
It's always fun when you find something and you're like, this is really weird, and then someone else actually publishes a full write-up and you're like, I'm not crazy. I knew what I was doing.
Exactly. Alright, here. Alright, here. So I grabbed 3 different miners for tonight. You know, with all of this, I've collected quite a few, but I felt these were some good, you know, ways to just kind of show off what you might see. Take a look at case 1 here. Alright, so this is one of those ones that you would generally find in the temp directory trying to masquerade as a PHP session file. And this is using the YAM miner program. And generally, this can be called one of 2 ways. With the configuration file is this one here, but there is another variation on that, which is in one of the other cases here. So let's get that started. Alright, so as it starts going there, so I'm running it here so you can actually see it, and when you run it, you know, you can see right up there, miner version, YAM, yada yada, generic, YVG 1900, which is, I believe, the author of the thing. And you can see that it's talking to the cryptopool.fr, again, using that port quad 3 there, and it'll just kind of keep running and going through its stuff here. Switch to my other tab here. And we should see pretty quick, and actually I'm going to shrink that a little bit. So it's a little bit bigger than what we're going to want to see. Alright, there we go. So you can see pretty quickly that it's using pretty much 100% of a CPU core there, and you can see exactly, you know, how it was called sitting up there. So pretty obvious if you're looking at this output here. And also pretty obvious if you're taking a peek here. I don't know how much hiding in plain sight I'm really going to call on this one if someone's actually looking at it, but a lot of times these things are getting used where people aren't necessarily looking. So until someone actually looks at it, yeah, it can, you know, just keep running away without a problem. Once someone looks at it, I think it's pretty quick to figure out, and actually I guess I should say most of the times when we get involved in an investigation on these is almost always due to a load incident. So generally the actual owner of the web server doesn't know that they're running a crypto miner. They are just complaining because their website's loading slow. Which, I mean, when you're using a lot of server resources to mine cryptocurrency, that's going to happen. Alright, we'll cut that one down. And let's go to case 2 here. Alright, so in here we have one looks a little more self-contained, but actually I need to pull up one more piece of data on that. And this one was a little bit interesting too, as it is using a different crypto coin. Now, when I first saw it, I was like, that's strange. Hadn't seen a single other crypto coin or cryptocoin miner in use besides Monero. I think I've seen Litecoin all at once, but they also say don't mine on CPUs due to the return rate on it. But I noticed this one here. So this one's talking to a domain called mine.sumo.fairpool.cloud. Now, this one's not doing Monero. It's doing a coin called Sumocoin, which is a Monero fork. So it essentially is Monero, and I'm actually starting to see Sumocoin almost more than Monero, because since it's a brand new project, it gets your payouts a heck of a lot quicker. Don't know if anyone was paying too close of attention to the last one, but most of the output from the miner was actually saying, nothing found, trying again, nothing found, trying again. Whereas with Sumocoin, pretty much every time it sends something, it's going to get a, hey, we accepted your hash. And if we switch our views here again, and this time you actually see the configuration in the running process. So again, pretty easy to spot once you're looking for it. And again, also pretty easy to pull the information to figure out where it's talking to and who it's paying. Let's see here. Yeah, same thing again. So, and because they're all using Monero, pretty much all of them are going to include somewhere in the configuration the Cryptonite and the Stratum plus TCP strings. So those are pretty good ways to, if you're running a search, to find this stuff, is if anything contains those strings, it's a pretty good indicator that that's what you got running there. All right, let's get that one killed. All right. And here, this is actually that one that was running on the Solar server. So the two previous miners there, well, I guess technically the second one too was actually, I guess it's rewinding a whole step here. Of the mining programs that are out there, 3 tend to see the most use. The YAM miner, which was the first one that I showed there, XMRig, which is actually the second and third one that I used here, and MinerD, which is kind of the oldest and original of the mining programs. I saw it a lot initially, but nowadays it's pretty much always XMRig or the YAM miner. The YAM miner tends to use those .c files and technically all of these can either use a configuration file or a direct command line entry for the configuration. There are some forks I'm starting to see where people are trying to set up remote configurations. So instead of having anything local, it pulls a configuration from a remote server. I gotta do some more research before I can really get some good information on that. But let's keep this guy running. If I remember. same thing again. So again, trying to masquerade as something a little, you know, less obvious. And another trick that I've seen used as well is been the run it, remove it. So they'll drop a miner on the system, and then they'll remove the actual binary. So that way it's not actually running. Well, I should say it's running, but it's not actually on the system as a file. So when I first saw that, it definitely threw me for a bit of a loop because the way they were getting in was still active. So when I stopped the running process and I couldn't find anything on the system that was actually the miner binary, I was like, okay. And then I was about to log out of the server, and I just ran another, you know, check the running processes, and it was running again. And so it drove me nuts until I found the way that they were accessing the system. That's exactly what they were doing. They were literally running the commands, drop the file, run the file, remove the file over their command channel.
How often are they doing that?
I've only seen that once. Generally, so, you know, as with most, you know, compromises out there, you've got a lot of low-hanging fruit, you know, people who are just taking advantage of the weakest stuff out there and really don't care. And then you have a smaller group of people who actually try and hide their tracks and stuff like that. So yeah, of all the things I've seen, I've only seen that once.
I mean, sorry, how many times are those setting commands being run to the server? Like every couple minutes?
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure exactly how they were tracking that one. I don't have it in the ones that I've got hooked up here, but a lot of the other ones will actually run a cron. So it'll look to see if there's a miner running already on the system, and if there is, it does nothing, and if there isn't, it starts it. With the one that was being dropped and removed, there was nothing on the system that told me that was looking for it, so it's possible there was actually someone on the other end, you know, who saw the process, you know, no longer reporting to their pool, and so they, you know, just resent the command.
Okay.
Kill that one manually. There, cool. Don't want to kill my laptop here. Alright. Where'd my mouse go? Alright, so, oh, you know what? I did forget one thing. Bad presenter me. Forgot to mention the most important takeaway that I've had from all of this. So, what did I do with all of that information? Well, of course, I built a tool. So, to cut down on the work our admins needed to do to find this stuff, I took the information that I learned and I put together a little whiz-bang thing that will go look for the things and tell me when it found the things. Yep. And again, based on the data that I originally started with, I was originally just looking for actual mining on the systems, but I ended up building in a few more things that I originally thought. So the ability to check for cryptojacking embedded in websites, as well as the ability to do some basic inoculation. So in this case, the pools that I am finding in malicious mining incidents, creating a list of those, and then the ability for you to block them from being able to be communicated with on their server. So It integrates either with your host file, or if you have the config server firewall package, it will actually use that to do an active block list where it pulls for it every couple hours or every day to see if there's new domains added. So that's kind of neat. And I'll probably do more with it later, but yeah, so I did a thing with that information, which then gets me back to where I wanted to be within the slides.
Question.
Go for it.
Egress filtering, when you do egress filtering, which is what you just alluded to, do the miners still burn power? Do they burn CPU time, or do they shut up and get quiet?
So yeah, if you block them from being able to communicate, they don't do anything.
Okay.
The process will still be running, but instead of you seeing it be at 100% CPU usage, it'll be at no CPU usage. So it'll still be running.
I was curious how
Yeah.
stupid the miners were. Because everything is terrible, and
Yep.
I can totally see a miner just going off and running, absent actually being able to contact anyone.
Yep, nope. Since they can't make connection, in fact, you know what? Here, I'm trying to think. What do I have set up on my VM machine here? Let's see if this will work. No, not gonna play nice. I don't have it fully set up on my little
You were going to
VM.
demo, I understand.
Yep. Demos
believe
fail
you.
sometimes. But yeah, so you'd still see it running, but no usage. So effectively, you've neutered it. Obviously, you know,
Burn process table and memory, but that's about it.
right, you're not burning the electricity, and you're not, you know, negatively affecting your other services like you would with it running fully.
With that, any idea of how much it might be costing, or how much return they're getting versus how much, you know, electricity and bandwidth costs? How much the coin gives you?
I mean, as far as the people who are compromising these sites, for them, I would say it's pretty much all profit, because they're generally not going after targets they wouldn't have already. It's more just that they're monetizing them in new ways. So most of these servers that do have a crypto miner running on them, you have greater than, I would say, 70% chance you're also going to find phishing or spamming occurring on the server as well. So this generally tends to be an and, as opposed to this is all we're doing, generally. And so I don't think that the malicious actors are really making that more of an investment to do this, but it is costing those who it's actually happening to, whether that be through downtime from your services, because if the miner isn't wise, they will literally use up all of your stuff. Now, some of these miners can get away for a pretty good chunk of time if they're wise with, you know, checking the environment they're in and utilizing it properly. So, you know, most of these web servers, you know, they've got anywhere from 4 to 32, you know, server cores, and you can tell your miner to run on just a single core, and on most servers, you'd not notice much difference.
I was just wondering if it would make sense for your customers to actually be running their own miners.
You know, you could. I don't know if the payout's good enough for that. I think really, if you want to make money mining crypto coins, you generally get a better return when that's your sole purpose. And I guess it kind of depends. So, like, for instance, right now, I think that I expect to see a lot more Sumocoin in the future. It's not worth a whole lot right now, but if you hold on to it to the point where it does become worth something, I think that's where you're going to get better returns. But it's really a gamble. It's 100% a gamble. Monero right now tends to float between about $250 and $350, but the amount of CPU time you need to put in to get a single Monero coin, it's pretty high. I mean, most, you know, on that chart, you know, showing all the payouts, most of those miners had made 1 to 1.5 coins. Whereas whereas with the first Sumocoin one I found, they already earned 1,100 coins. Or no, I'm sorry, it was 300 coins, but the exchange rate was $3. So they made $1,100 on their 300 coins. So while the coin is, basically worthless compared to Monero, they actually made more than most of the Monero miners because of how easy it is to generate those coins currently. So maybe, but I haven't really seen any legitimate miners on our network.
Have you monetized the loss to your customers? The cost that they're
Incurring
because of these?
Haven't yet. It is something I've wanted to get into, whether or not from the direct customers or just from us as well, since we're the hosting provider. We're the first one that pays for that. Eventually it does trickle down to the end customers, but I have been interested to try and figure out a way to get the impact for us as an organization, and then depending on that you can filter it down more towards individuals. Now, most of the data I have is stuff that I had access to, so I don't have full access to all of the stuff on our network. If I get access to that in the future, that's definitely an area that I'd like to look into more.
I had a question about the delivery method.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So you were saying something about like it being basically cross-site scripting with JavaScript, but how did that get the code to run on the server? Wouldn't that be more of a client-side browser attack?
So most of the cryptojacking isn't so much from cross-site scripting. So it's usually from the good old plain old stuff. So someone has a WordPress with a bad password, or they've got a something that's so out of date. So again, it's not so much a new technique for getting access. It's more a way of monetizing the access you already had. So most of them is they're actually just modifying the files themselves on the server.
Gotcha.
So anyway, just got a tool to run across your entire data center?
So right now it's a tool that any of our admins have access to run as necessary on servers. Again, it's a little bit above my position to get it to the point where it can be installed by default. I think it would be a good tool to have installed by default because it doesn't hurt to have it there. And even I would advocate for adding the block list by default to our servers, because unless someone legitimately wants to mine cryptocurrency, I don't see a reason not to negate that risk to the majority of our customers.
Even as a hunt team, they can hunt for those patterns right across.
Oh, 100%, and that's where we get to this. Is this a dumpster fire, or is it something a little more manageable? And coming back to the original title of the talk, because these things are so noisy and there's such easy ways to track them, whether it be at your network level or on individual systems if you have the right monitoring in place, I think that this is actually a good thing because it's getting a lot of the activity of the malicious actors away from actual destructive things like ransomware into something that honestly, worst case scenario is you might have a little bit of downtime until you figure out that there's a crypto miner running on whatever it is that took you down. Data hasn't been destroyed. Things usually haven't been exfilled. For the most part, you lost some CPU cycles and some cost for electricity in most cases. And if you are looking for these proactively, they can actually help you find holes before you have a larger incident. So I think that in a lot of ways, this is actually a good change in malicious activity.
I would agree.
Yeah, that exactly the slide right here. Why? They're noisy. If you know what you're looking for, they don't destroy things, and they can help you find things that could otherwise have been a much, much larger incident. As we've been discussing, how can you find these things? Network traffic is one of the easiest ways. Either looking for known miner pools, ports that they communicate over. The miner program themselves, so this is one of the outputs from VirusTotal of uploading one of those generic miner programs. Detection rates are pretty good, again, because they tend to be just the same standard off-the-shelf stuff, not customized. And, you know, other than that, you know, load and performance impacts. Generally, if nobody's looking for anything, those are going to be the things that are going to trigger you to it. As I discussed earlier, I built the tool. It does the things. Now, since we work in a Linux server environment, obviously my tool tends to be Linux biased. However, you know, there's plenty of incidences of crypto mining on Windows systems as well. Generally, because most Windows systems tend to be client systems, this is more where you're seeing things like banking Trojans start to drop a crypto miner in addition to all of the other stuff they're doing. Again, the taking advantage of existing, you know, access. But at the same time, you can still use, you know, information, you know, that I've compiled here for that stuff too. So writing things like snort rules. So besides the actual tool that runs on the system, the complements to that tool are all the data feeds that I've got compiled. So I put together both IP and domain lists as well as snort rules that can trigger when there's traffic through those domains or you know, DNS lookups, stuff like that. If you want to be a little more proactive on your client systems, 0.1 on GitHub has put together a pretty comprehensive list of websites that have been seen with cryptojacking. So if you want to deploy some protection across your network to those endpoints, I would definitely recommend taking a look at his list. If you're doing your own kind of, you know, incident information, threat lookups, and want to create your own snort rules, this is the tool that I use to create my own custom ones, is NCC Group. Built this tool that allows you to you just give it a list of domain names or IP addresses and tell it where you want the rules to start, and it will compile them for you. No need for you to have to custom write them. Just provide it the list and it will make the rules for you. So, really neat tool. And that's it. So, if you have other questions, let me know. Go ahead, clap.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, we just yes. I don't know how we failed as a group to clap. That was
It was asynchronous.
yeah. And that we're done with that.